Danica, I'm not even asking for objectivity, to be honest. I'm asking for simply a deep appreciation of the roots of our culture that have brought us this peace and this wealth and what, until now, some sort of civility in our debates. I mean, this is all what's at stake. You look at the streets, you look at the protesters, they are the threat. They are the threat to it.
Oh, absolutely, Andrew. This is the threat. This is what is deeply dividing our nation. And the fractures really began, if you look back to October 9 last year on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. That's when the discourse began, and It has crept up. It's crept up since then. And now it has culminated in last weekend when the flags of a listed terrorist organisation, a barbaric and murderous terrorist organisation, are being so openly and freely flown in the streets in Sydney and Melbourne, yet the media bias is sickening. And we've got a situation where, as you just showed there, where Media Watch, Paul Barry, are saying, well, it was nothing more than trivial. I was offended by that. I'm sure many of our viewers were offended by that. I don't want to see flags of a terrorist organisation being flown in the streets. It's disgusting and it's sickening, but the impartiality has been lost in this complete debate. The focus no longer is on Hamas, on the war that was started by Hamas. It has gone into a completely different discourse, and I do believe the media has a lot to do with it.
Yes, I do think that, but I also think we need to look at our universities, need to look at what's taught at schools, we need to look at our immigration intake. We need a fundamental revisiting of so much of what's produced. See, this, I hear people say, we need to now start banning these protests, right? Start banning protests. Like, wait a minute. The free speech and protests are a fundamental sign of a free society. What I think they're really saying is we need to hide, suppress, by force, stop us confronting the intellectual rot that's out there that we've created by all these other things that I've mentioned, education, immigration, all that kind of stuff, the decline in nationalism, the tearing down of our national symbols. We don't want to see that result. We want to shut people down. That's what's going on, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the left obviously has driven an agenda in our institutions over the last 20 or 30 years. But the fact remains the right hasn't been strong enough to fight against it. And if you look at the centre-right parties in Australia, they don't understand really what classical liberalism means anymore. I haven't heard a cogent argument for free speech from a liberal politician in God knows how long. The fact is, if you want to actually start turning around the institutions, we need to have political leadership on the right that understands the importance of freedom, that understands the importance of standing up for our culture. And unfortunately, there aren't many leaders like that who are willing to do so.
They can't argue, so they suppress. Grants, talking about intellectual corruption, Danica, here's another sign, right? Grants awarded with the Australian Research Council. I used to go through this years ago and it was just a joke. This time they include the latest rounds of grants from the research include nearly $500,000 for academics to study exploring games and play-based activities to engage citizens in setting the agenda for climate adaptation and policy. There's always climate. Add that in, you get your money. There's another $500,000 to identify the causes of gender bias in the staged English language translations of ancient Greek tragedy and to redress this problem, redress something written more than 2,000 years ago, and nearly $4 million to identify the so-called missing link in global movements of multi-species justices using innovative musical approaches to communicate the urgency of climate change, which is always a moneymaker when you're applying for grants. What does all this nonsense tell you?
Well, I think it tells you everything you need to know about the state of universities in this country, Andrew, by using this so-called research, which is really just self-serving. It is just to appease the lefty academia, to make it look like our academic system is really functioning really well. Instead, I mean, can someone please explain to me what this innovative musical approaches to climate change is, Andrew? Is it some sort of quasi-Broadway musical adaptation of climate change? I mean, mean, please, how is this
coming
going
to a theatre near you?
Coming to a theatre near you, selling tickets soon. I mean, how is this going to advance our country? How is it going to make this country more prosperous?
No, I don't know.
And, you know, just one more point. We were talking about, you know, climate wars just then. Well, what are they teaching the students in these universities when this is what the academia is studying, please?
Precisely my point. Danica De Giorgio and Will Kingston, thank you both for your time.